The vast chamber pulsed with quiet arrogance, each delegate convinced they were the pinnacle of civilization. Tiered rows of alien species glittered under the cold lights, their eyes, or equivalents, fixed on the center floor. For generations, this was the place where lesser civilizations came to submit. The walls bore murals of conquered worlds, a gallery of humiliation for those who had dared oppose the Galactic Council. Today, they expected to add another name to the long list: humanity. The Chancellor sat in the high seat, draped in imperial robes woven from metals that shimmered with every movement. His voice carried the practiced tone of someone who believed their word was law. The matter before us concerns the Terran species. After sustained hostilities and repeated violations of territorial sovereignty, the Council has convened to dictate the terms of resolution. His gaze swept across the chamber, stopping briefly on the lone human standing at the center platform. Every alien present had already drawn their conclusions. Humanity's fleets had been mauled. Supply lines severed. Border colonies isolated. Reports claimed Earth's navy had been forced into retreat on multiple fronts. That, combined with humanity's relative youth among the stars, made this assembly little more than a formality. The outcome was preordained in their minds: surrender, disarmament, and permanent subjugation under Council oversight. Whispers fluttered between the seats. A scaled envoy muttered to his neighbor about the inevitable collapse of such a short-lived species. A feathery diplomat laughed softly, noting how the human appeared without an entourage, without visible weapons, without even ceremonial armor. To them, this was not bravery, it was the final, pitiful gasp of a civilization about to vanish. The Chancellor began reading the proposed terms. They were not offers but ultimatums: the complete dismantling of human military forces, the turnover of all interstellar shipyards, permanent garrisons of Council troops in Terran space, and an annual tribute of resources to compensate for the cost of the war. It was the same script used on countless worlds before. The same pattern of conquest disguised as diplomacy. When the Chancellor finished, the chamber waited for the human to speak, expecting perhaps pleading, perhaps outrage, but inevitably, compliance. The envoy stood motionless for a moment, his hands loosely at his sides, his gaze fixed on the Chancellor with an expression that betrayed neither fear nor anger. Then, with a calm that cut through the chamber's smug energy, he spoke. Negotiation? No. We've decided against it. The words were simple, but their weight was instant. Conversations died mid-sentence. The shift in the room was almost physical, as if the air itself thickened. The Chancellor's brow furrowed, a small crack in his carefully maintained mask of authority. You misunderstand your position, the Chancellor replied, leaning forward. Your fleets are shattered. Your colonies burn. The only path forward is the one we offer. There will be no alternative. The human's reply was steady, almost casual. You assume that we came here to accept your path. That is your first mistake. Around the chamber, subtle signs of unease began to surface. A delegate from the Etris cluster whispered sharply into a communicator. The representative of the Nora Syndicate shifted in his seat, long fingers drumming a nervous pattern against the armrest. For the first time, the Council's certainty felt less like law and more like an assumption, and assumptions could be wrong. The Chancellor's voice hardened. Defiance will not save you. Your resistance is admirable but pointless. Every day you fight, your losses grow. The war will end on our terms, or it will end with your annihilation. The human tilted his head slightly, as though considering the statement. Annihilation? You believe we fear that? You believe we would come here hoping to avoid it? You are mistaken. The tone was not theatrical. It was not the bluster of a desperate species bluffing for survival. It was factual, as if reading from a report. That made it worse. Confidence born of arrogance was easy to recognize. Confidence without arrogance was far more dangerous. The Chancellor leaned back, perhaps to mask the momentary loss of control. If you do not wish to negotiate, then this meeting serves no purpose. It serves one, the human said quietly. We came to make sure you understand that our refusal is not ignorance of the consequences. It is certainty of them. A ripple of discomfort moved through the chamber. The human's gaze did not waver as silence settled, heavier than before. The council, for all its pomp, was unused to having its authority dismissed outright. Here, in the most powerful hall of the galaxy, a lone representative of a battered world had just denied them the one thing they always got: submission. The Chancellor's voice, when it returned, lacked some of its earlier confidence. "Then your fate is sealed." "Perhaps," the human answered, his expression unreadable. "But so is yours." The chamber froze. It was not the volume of the words, but the certainty behind them that unsettled even the most war-hardened delegates. Somewhere, in the layered minds of the Council's elite, a seed of doubt took root. It would grow quickly. The meeting had just begun, but already, the balance of power in the room had shifted. And the Council, for the first time in living memory, did not feel entirely in control. The Chancellor's reply came laced with scorn, his words sharp enough to draw the attention of every corner of the chamber. He accused the human of posturing, claiming no species so diminished could hope to defy the collective might of the Council. "You are a remnant, not a threat," he declared. "What you mistake for resolve is nothing more than the final arrogance of the defeated." The human did not flinch. Instead, without a word, he reached into a small satchel and withdrew a narrow metallic rod, pressing a hidden stud. The chamber's central holographic array shimmered to life, casting an array of images into the air, vivid, undeniable, and far more disturbing than anything the Council had expected to see. In perfect clarity, the delegates watched as alien warships, fleets belonging to some of the most powerful members present, burned in silent space. Convoys laden with munitions were shown erupting into fragments under precision strikes. Supply depots, supposedly secure and hidden, lay in smoldering ruin. The banners of multiple Council factions were visible in the wreckage, each one a silent indictment of their vulnerability. "These," the human began, his voice even and steady, "are not archival records. Every event you see occurred within the last 48 standard hours." A ripple of disbelief spread through the hall. Some scoffed loudly, muttering about forgeries and manufactured illusions. Others, pale and rigid, began tapping urgently into personal comm devices. The human did not interrupt them. He let the images play, one after another, precise, methodical devastation, delivered without warning and without the possibility of interception. When Admiral Sarek rose from his seat, the tension thickened. A figure of towering presence and military reputation, he was known for both his victories and his unwillingness to show fear. His voice boomed across the chamber. "Explain. Our fleets are vast, our patrols constant. No force of your scale could infiltrate our space undetected, much less cripple our strategic reserves." The human regarded him with an expression that held neither deference nor hostility, only a clinical assessment. "You assume we fight as you fight. That is your first mistake." Gasps broke from several sections of the chamber. The choice of words was deliberate, echoing the envoy's earlier statement, and underlining that this defiance was no bluff. The human continued, each syllable measured. "You build war on the foundation of mass fleets and fixed lines. You prize spectacle and intimidation. We learned long ago that such measures fail against enemies who do not think like you. We strike where you are blind, not where you are strong." The murmurs swelled into a low roar. Delegates turned to one another, exchanging hurried whispers. The envoy's presence had begun to erode the Council's composure, replacing the smug expectation of victory with the first faint outlines of fear. A delegate from the Kelrathi Union spoke up, his voice trembling despite the attempt at authority. "If this is true, then your actions are reckless beyond reason. The Council's retaliation will be absolute." The human's lips curved faintly, though it was not a smile. "Retaliation presumes you have the means to retaliate. Do you?" The question landed with the weight of a blow. For a moment, no one responded. The silence was broken only by the faint chime of encrypted transmissions flowing between panicked aides and military attaches. Several delegates had already begun issuing coded orders to their homeworlds, their faces tight with urgency. The human allowed the pause to deepen before speaking again. "These attacks are not isolated. They are part of a larger design. While you gathered here to demand our surrender, we moved through your neglected corridors, your unsecured channels, your overlooked dependencies. You believe your strength lies in unity. In truth, it is your greatest weakness. The Chancellor slammed his palm onto the armrest, demanding order, but his voice no longer commanded the room with the same authority. Too many delegates had seen their own insignias among the wreckage. Too many had recognized the locations displayed. The chamber's carefully cultivated aura of superiority was unraveling under the weight of evidence. We will not match you ship for ship, the envoy continued. We will not meet you where you are strongest. We will unravel you from within, until you are forced to choose between defending your borders and defending your pride. You will fail at one, and that will be enough. The tension was now a living thing, coiled and restless in every row of seats. Some delegates avoided the human's gaze entirely, while others stared as if trying to discern whether this was courage or madness. The truth, that it was either, but something colder and more deliberate, was dawning on them slowly. The human ended with a statement that left no space for rebuttal. We are not here to plead for terms. We are here to ensure you understand, the war you thought you were winning has already changed shape. And in the shape it has now taken, you are not prepared. When the holograms faded, the room did not recover its earlier composure. The images had lodged themselves in the minds of every leader present, silent proof that the human's refusal was not the last gasp of a dying people, but the opening stroke of something far more dangerous. The council had come to demand submission. Instead, it had been shown a glimpse of its own fragility. The Chancellor, grasping for control, announced that the Council would impose an immediate and total embargo on all Terran trade. He spoke of suffocating supply lines, of cutting off access to critical resources, of forcing compliance through starvation rather than battle. The declaration drew approving murmurs from several factions, their confidence briefly rekindled by the idea of economic strangulation. The human listened without interruption, the calm in his stance unshaken. When the Chancellor finished, the envoy activated the holographic array again, this time not with scenes of destruction, but with streams of raw data, code, and intercepted transmissions. At first, the delegates failed to grasp what they were seeing. Then recognition began to spread, slow and dawning, as they realized these were schematics, encryption keys, supply routes, and fleet deployment schedules from dozens of worlds, information that no outsider should have been able to obtain. You believe you can starve us, the human said evenly. Yet your own food convoys travel routes we have mapped in detail. Your fuel depots are indexed. Your merchant fleets sail on schedules that we control. The words were not shouted. They did not need to be. The weight was in their certainty. An Insector delegate barked that such claims were impossible. Even as he spoke, a comms officer at his side paled, leaning in to whisper confirmation of disruptions to several of their core distribution hubs. Another faction's representative stiffened as a discreet alert flashed across his datapad, warning of sudden system outages in his home sector. The chamber's rhythm shifted again, away from unified arrogance toward fragmented alarm. The envoy's tone did not change. In your eyes, victory comes from overpowering your opponent. In ours, it comes from making your opponent's strength irrelevant. We do not need to match your fleets or your armies. We need only to make them useless. The Kilrathi delegate who had spoken earlier found his voice again, though now it carried a brittle edge. You threaten the lifelines of the galaxy. Do you think this will make you allies? It will unite us against you. It will do the opposite, the human replied. You will not unite. You cannot. Your alliances are bound by convenience, not loyalty. The moment we create strain, you will turn on one another to protect your own holdings. That is your flaw. And it is the opening we have already begun to exploit. The words were punctuated by a ripple of confirmation from the chamber's outer comms relays. In the midst of the meeting, news began to circulate of sudden skirmishes breaking out along disputed borders between member species. Unverified, but believable enough to sow doubt, the reports fed the gnawing paranoia that was taking root in the Council's core. The Chancellor demanded that the human reveal the scale of their infiltration, to which the envoy responded with a flat refusal. You will discover it for yourselves. Not all at once, but piece by piece, as your confidence erodes and your reach contracts. The statement was almost worse than the images of destroyed fleets from earlier. Physical losses could be rebuilt, infrastructure could be repaired. But trust, between member states, between commanders and their crews, between leaders and their intelligence networks, once broken, could not be restored without years of effort. And years were something the Council no longer seemed to possess in abundance. A deep silence settled before Admiral Sarek's voice cut through it, lower and less certain than before. What is it you seek? The envoy met his gaze without hesitation. We seek nothing from you. We do not want your territory, your tribute, or your acknowledgement. What we require is that you never mistake us for a people who can be bent to your will. That is the only outcome that matters. The murmurs returned, sharper now, fueled not by arrogance but by the raw calculation of risk. Delegates began to measure not the cost of war to humanity, but the cost of war to themselves. The calculus was shifting, and not in the Council's favor. The human's final words before deactivating the display left no room for misinterpretation. This war no longer exists on the battlefield you imagined. It has moved into the places you thought untouchable. And from there, we will decide when and how it ends, not you. When the lights dimmed and the holograms vanished, the chamber remained unnervingly still. The Council's unity was fracturing, not through open defiance, but through the quiet, creeping realization that the enemy they had thought cornered was already deep inside their walls. The human had not only refused to submit, he had redefined the very nature of the fight. The human's gaze swept across the chamber, taking in the shifting expressions of the delegates, some tight with denial, others already calculating the damage. Then he pressed the command into the device at his side, and the air above the floor came alive with new imagery. It was not static files or archived battles this time, but live feeds. The timestamp in the corner proved these were unfolding in the present moment. Massive shipyards floated in orbit around alien homeworlds, ringed with defense stations and patrol craft. On screen, those defenses were being stripped away with precision strikes. Entire carrier frames collapsed in slow motion, spilling molten debris into the void. A convoy under the flag of one of the most militarized Council factions erupted in a chain of explosions, its own escort vessels firing on each other in the chaos of falsified orders. The realization rippled through the hall almost simultaneously. These weren't distant conflicts. They were watching the dismemberment of their own assets as it happened. Several delegates scrambled to verify the feeds, only to confirm them as authentic. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating, broken only by the frantic murmuring of aides transmitting desperate commands home. The human's voice cut through it all. These are not battles you can turn back. They are already decided. What you see is the consequence of every assumption you made about us. You thought we would beg for mercy. You thought we would seek your permission to survive. The Chancellor's voice, stripped now of its earlier grandeur, demanded to know if this was an open declaration of conquest. The envoy's reply was almost dispassionate. No. Conquest would require us to want what you have. We do not. This is a correction. You set out to teach us our place. We are merely returning the lesson. Admiral Sarek leaned forward, his jaw tight, the first flicker of unease in his famously steady gaze. If not conquest, then what? What end do you see to this? The human answered without hesitation. An end where you understand that the cost of crossing us will never be worth whatever you sought to gain. This is not revenge. It is deterrence, written in a language you cannot ignore. On one of the feeds, a vast orbital ring belonging to the Ralthus Combined fractured in half, collapsing into the atmosphere of the world below. Another displayed the orderly retreat of human strike craft, leaving behind only wreckage and dead calm signals. Each scene was as controlled as it was devastating, proof of capability without a single wasted motion. Some in the chamber still searched for a way to reclaim authority. A delegate from the Vorian Pact rose and threatened that the Council's combined military might would crush any continued aggression. The human didn't even look in his direction. Your combined might? He said softly. Watch closely. That unity exists only in this room. Out there, you are already fighting each other for resources we denied you. You cannot turn that against us now. You are too busy protecting yourselves. A sudden alert flared across several delegates' consoles. Conflicts were breaking out in multiple sectors as Council fleets, misled by human interference, clashed under the belief they were engaging hostile forces. The Chancellor's voice faltered as he attempted to restore order, drowned out by the rising din of private arguments and shouted commands. The human waited until the noise began to crest before speaking again. You will remember this not because of the damage done, but because of how easily it was done. You considered us too small to matter. That miscalculation has cost you fleets, worlds, and the stability you once took for granted. There was no call for surrender, no list of demands. Only a final, measured statement. We will leave here today, and you will rebuild what we have broken. But you will do so with the knowledge that it can happen again at any time, should you ever decide to test us. One by one, the feeds faded to darkness, leaving only the reflection of uneasy faces in the polished surface of the central floor. The envoy stood in silence for a long moment, letting the weight of the images linger. By the time he deactivated the device and straightened to leave, the Council's authority in that chamber had been reduced to little more than the echoes of its own fractured confidence. No one in the chamber moved as the humans stood there, the silence pressing in like a physical force. The Council, for all its power and ceremony, had been reduced to stillness. The Chancellor's gaze darted between delegates, searching for an ally willing to speak, but none found the courage. Every mind in the room was replaying what they had just seen, measuring the damage, calculating the risks, and finding no path that led to certainty of victory. The envoy broke the silence with a voice stripped of any flourish. You have seen what we are capable of when provoked. You have seen the precision, the reach, the consequences. Understand this. There is no treaty, no compromise, no negotiation that will bind us. The only thing that will protect you from us is to leave us alone. A delegate from the Varith clans began to protest, but the human's words cut across her before the sound could carry. You've misjudged us from the start. You believed we wanted what you have. We don't. We don't want your worlds, your fleets, or your approval. We want to live without your hand at our throat. That is all, and for that, we will fight without limits. The Chancellor finally found his voice, though it was low and uneven. If you walk away now, you will remain an enemy of the Council. Enemy? The human's tone was flat, but the weight of it reached every ear. We are already your enemy. The difference now is that you know what that means. Whispers rippled among the seats, uncertain, unsettled. The envoy's presence was not that of a conqueror demanding tribute, nor a supplicant pleading for mercy. It was something unfamiliar to them, a power that neither sought their destruction nor feared their retribution, a force that acted on its own terms and expected nothing in return. You will rebuild what you've lost, the human continued. You'll pour resources into your militaries, expand your fleets, reinforce your borders. And still, the question will gnaw at you. How much of it do we already know? How close are we already to dismantling it again? The room remained silent, but the tension was thick enough to feel. The envoy let it stretch, forcing every leader present to sit with the thought. There will be no further warnings, he said at last. We have shown you enough. The next time we meet in this hall, it will not be to talk. Admiral Sarek leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable but his eyes fixed on the envoy. The human's attention lingered on him for a moment, as though acknowledging a soldier who understood what the others still struggled to grasp. This was not a threat to be contained through force of arms. It was a truth to be lived with. Some delegates shifted in their seats, already thinking ahead to damage control, to political maneuvers that might distance their factions from whatever the Council decided. The fracture lines were visible now, lines that would deepen in the months to come as paranoia eroded the trust that held them together. The human stepped back from the center, not in retreat but in closure. His final words carried the weight of something irreversible. You will remember this day as the moment you realized your reach had limits. That you could not break us, and that you would live with the knowledge of what it costs to try. Without waiting for dismissal, the envoy turned and began walking toward the exit. No one called for guards. No one tried to stop him. The doors opened, and the chamber's grand acoustics swallowed the sound of his departure, leaving only the uneasy quiet of leaders who had been forced to confront a reality they had never believed possible. Long after the human was gone, the delegates remained seated, as if moving too quickly might draw unwanted attention. The Chancellor stared at the empty space on the floor where the envoy had stood, the truth settling over him like a weight he could not shake. Humanity had not sought their destruction, but they had left behind something far more enduring, the certainty that in any future conflict, the Council would no longer be the unquestioned power. It would not be written in the official records this way, but every leader present would carry the same unspoken understanding: the war had not ended. It had simply shifted to a battlefield where the Council no longer held the advantage, and where the memory of one unshaken human would dictate their every move.